when you enroll in transparency, Amazon will send a notice out to every seller who's sold your products saying that going forward, this brand is enrolled in transparency and codes will be required for inventory. So at that point, all resellers of your products need to request the codes from you, the brand.
This is the Ecommerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Ecommerce Braintrust podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kiri Masters, and today we're talking about Amazon's transparency program. And Amazon introduced this program in a beta format or a pilot format late in 2017. And since then, they've been enrolling brands onto this program fairly slowly. But in the last couple of months, they've really ramped up this program, which is designed to prevent counterfeiting. So there's been a lot of misinformation has been spread about transparency due to people asking questions of Seller Central support representatives and getting really incorrect and inaccurate information back from the support team. There is not a whole ton of additional content that Amazon has released about this program. So there's certainly some misunderstanding in the marketplace about what this program's used for, what's allowable, what's not, what is it really designed to do. And so in this episode today, I'm hoping to clear up some of those misconceptions about transparency. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, just give an overview of the program as well. So transparency is an anti-counterfeiting program that Amazon has released. They want to be very clear that this is not to be used as a vendor management program. And what I mean by that is you're a brand, you're selling on Amazon, and then you've got unauthorized sellers or resellers or distributors reselling your product on Amazon, and that has implications with pricing issues, potentially quality. Just generally, most brands don't like it, and it's not their preferred business model. So that is not what Amazon transparency is designed for. And in fact, it's considered a direct violation of the transparency program if you're using it as a vendor management tool. So if you, for example, are only applying transparency codes to your Amazon merchandise and sending it in, and you're not putting the transparency codes on other inventory for brick and mortar retail or whatever other channel you're using where you're selling to distributors, that is a violation, and those brands will be removed from transparency and potentially further implications as well. And we know that that means suspensions, being banned from Amazon potentially. It's very clear that this is an anti-counterfeiting program and not to deal with unauthorized sellers. So on that note, what exactly is transparency? It is a serialized barcode, essentially a sticker that's applied to each unit of inventory that you sell, and it's serialized to the unit level. So as a brand, once you enroll in transparency, let's say you send in 5,000 units, they're all labeled with a unique serialized code. Once they get to Amazon, Amazon knows that your brand is enrolled in transparency, all the products that are enrolled in transparency. And so they're looking for those transparency codes, scanning them, making sure that they're registered and they're part of the batch of codes that you've purchased as a company. That inventory is then accepted into Amazon's fulfillment centers. Anything else that arrives, inventory that is listed as being part of your brand, anything else that arrives without a code or with a code that wasn't part of your batch is investigated as counterfeit inventory. There are a few safeguards if it was actually sent in by you or one of your authorized sellers or distributors or people who've gotten hold of authentic inventory. So there is a process where, like, if you're sort of cycling into transparency, they will investigate it. But the point is that anything that isn't labeled correctly will be rejected or destroyed. So that's a big win for any brand that has issues with, obviously, with counterfeit inventory, with people showing up on their listing and selling something that's designed to look like their product, or even in some cases, just people or entities trying to sort of tip you over on Amazon and just send in something completely different and cause lots of customer issues. So this program is specifically going to address any counterfeit issues that you have. A very interesting aspect of transparency, and something that would have an immediate effect potentially for these brands, is that when you enroll in transparency, Amazon will send a notice out to every seller who's sold your products saying that going forward, this brand is enrolled in transparency and codes will be required for inventory. So at that point, all resellers of your products need to request the codes from you, the brand. So let's say out of 9 resellers on your listing, let's say 3 of them are actual counterfeiters and they're selling inauthentic products. So those are going to be taken care of right away. They're not going to be able to generate these codes. They're not going to be able to send in inventory. It's going to be, that's over for counterfeit sellers. 3, let's say out of that 9 again, 3 are unauthorized. So they haven't received permission from the brand to sell on Amazon, or they might be doing so in spite of a channel sales agreement. So they're not authorized. They will be put off by the fact that they're going to have to go back to the brand and say, hey, I'm selling on Amazon. Can I have some transparency codes, please? That's probably not going to happen with those sellers. And let's say, again, out of those 9 resellers in our example here, that 3 are authorized sellers, and they'll reach out to the brand and say, hey, we're Kiri's cake shop. Can we please get some transparency codes for these products? And the brand will oblige there. So it can be pretty immediate in terms of brand protection outcomes for those brands. Now, a big question that I had was, well, that's all well and good for sellers that are using FBA, because their inventory is going to be rejected when it gets sent in if they're counterfeit or they don't apply the codes. What about fulfilled by merchant? So in this case, if you're fulfilling items yourself, you don't need to have Amazon scan the codes to get accepted anyway. You can just send out the products. Well, in this, obviously, Amazon's thought of this already. And in this case, those fulfilled by merchant sellers will still need to add the codes to the inventory. And Amazon will be doing kind of spot checking, initial spot checking at least, to require them to scan and send a photo of the inventory with the codes on them. That'll look something like they need to scan, like take photos and send in a sample of their total inventory that they have, like 5% or something like that, to prove to Amazon that they have inventory with codes on them. And there will be, in the very near future, a scan and ship requirement as well. So that, what I mentioned before, is sort of a short-term fix. The long-term fix is that sellers using FBM will need to scan the codes before they ship them out. So this is, I do think that it's a pretty well thought out program by Amazon, lots of things that they've considered here. I do want to talk about a couple of case studies with brands that have enrolled in transparency and the kind of results that they've seen. So one example of a brand that enrolled in transparency and saw some good results here was Beardhead. And they had issues with fakes on their product listings. It was difficult for them to tell whether inventory was legitimate or not. And we know that the only way to really prove that to Amazon and get sellers taken down is to do test buys of their inventory. But that's time consuming. You need to order the product. You need to wait for it to arrive. You need to submit the evidence to Amazon. Once Amazon receives that evidence, they take it down pretty quickly, but it's a continual game of scanning for resellers, figuring out what's fake, what's not. So very time consuming to manage that process manually. So that's what Beardhead was facing. They had stopped allowing resellers to distribute on marketplaces. So they'd put it into their agreements, hey, you're not allowed to sell this product on Amazon or other marketplaces, but they still had ongoing issues with resellers and potentially counterfeit resellers as well, because it could have been older inventory and they wouldn't be able to prove otherwise without doing test buys. So even though the counterfeit issue wasn't in and of itself a huge problem for this brand, they decided to enroll in transparency as a precautionary measure. From their perspective, the cost of transparency was really inconsequential compared with the risk of counterfeiting. And the counterfeiting risk obviously has an impact on your brand reputation, with customers buying products that are faulty or, just not legitimate inventory. That is a big customer perception and branding issue, but you're also losing sales to that other company as well. So big far-reaching impacts here. But what this brand found is that the cost of those things happening, of the brand reputation issues, of the lost sales, was 100% worth the cost of transparency. And just to give a quick overview of the pricing here, so transparency is billed per code, and it's based on quantity tiers. So it's 5 cents per code up to 1 million codes. Between 1 and 10 million, 3 cents, and then over 10 million, 1 cent per code. So that is an annual fee. So it's based on, those tiers are based on what you're using annually. But the one thing to note is that because this is a fairly new program, they're trying to get as many brands in as possible. For the next 6 months, it's going to be free for 6 months or 100,000 codes. So if you do want to get something for free from Amazon, this is one of very few ways to get it. So back to the story of Beardhead. What they found during the implementation process is that it was quite smooth, and that the rep that they were working with to do implementation was very responsive. They used a third-party printer who's very familiar with transparency and how the codes need to be printed. The brand applied the labels themselves, sent the inventory in, and they did not find it to be very technical or difficult, and that Amazon was really responsive there. So ultimately, a thumbs up recommendation to other brands based on the cost of the product. I mean, we're talking about 1 to 5 cents per unit. So your unit economics needs to handle that type of cost. But from Beardhead's perspective, speaking with the owner of Beardhead, David, his perspective was, if Amazon's rolling out a program like this, I want to be involved because they know where the puck is going, and any way that he can get some kind of equity with Amazon, the better position he's going to be in. And I do like that perspective. I like to think about it in terms of watching what Amazon is doing rather than what they're saying. There's very little Amazon tells us about what their plans are with marketing, with advertising, with brand protection. We don't often get to peek behind the kimono. So the best chance that we have to know what's really working and what's not with Amazon and make sure that we're in their good graces is to follow what they're doing with their own products, follow what they're recommending to sellers, following what they're saying is best practice across their platform. So a few examples of that to me are just the huge focus Amazon has put on content recently. Previously, only a couple of years ago, if you wanted enhanced content on your product pages, you needed to be a wholesale vendor. You needed to buy A+ pages, which were something like $1,500 a page. Unless you got some sweetheart deal from Amazon, you had to pay a lot of money to get that type of content on your product pages. And what do you know? 2 years later, it's free for vendors. They rolled a very similar program out to sellers called Enhanced Brand Content. And to me, the cost of rolling that out is significant. And the cost of maintaining that type of content on product pages, things like really large images, 360 spin images, video, that takes a lot of bandwidth and a lot to maintain that data. So obviously Amazon sees huge benefits of having enhanced visual content on millions and millions of product pages. So if you think about it from that perspective, that Amazon's spending a lot of money on this. They've just rolled it out to pretty much anyone. So this must be a big win for conversions, ranking, whatever it is. So from that perspective, watching where the puck is going, transparency and counterfeit protection is something that Amazon cares about. They've prepared to put money behind this. They're rolling out this huge program. Their ultimate goal is to have other retailers using it as well. And so I think it's in the best interest of a brand to consider using a program like this. So it's only fair to talk about some of the drawbacks of this program and some of the ways that it's not going to be 100% foolproof. If it was going to be 100% foolproof, I think we'd be hearing a lot more about it. But I did, for the interest of an article that I wrote for Forbes.com about this, I did interview the Associate Professor of Operations Management at Carnegie Mellon University's Tepper School of Business, Su-Huang Cho. And Su-Huang Cho came back to me with some responses, being a supply chain expert, about what Amazon's transparency program's limitations might be. So generally, it's going to be effective to some extent, but will not reduce counterfeiting goods dramatically. And the reason for that is the technology focuses on packaging. So as a consumer, you can't be sure that the products inside haven't been replaced. So this is particularly true for products that don't go through Amazon FBA, including products that are sold by third-party sellers. So what this means is, obviously, if you're a reseller and you're someone who's doing something like retail arbitrage, where you're picking up inventory from that's on clearance at a Walmart or something like that, you could take the packaging that has the transparency codes, replace it with counterfeit inventory, and sell it. The second point is that the label may eventually be mimicked by some counterfeiters. So that is, I guess that is a risk. I would be interested to see what Amazon's technology looks like there, because I think just knowing who Amazon is, I'd suggest that they've been spending a lot of time on this to make sure that it can't be replicated. And the fact that the products are serialized to the individual unit level give me reason to think that that's going to be pretty difficult. If it's something like copying a UPC code or a regular barcode, 100%. I mean, it's not going to be very difficult to replicate a kind of barcode that is only unique at the product ASIN level. But if it's serialized to an individual unit level, that makes it a lot more complex. The final drawback, obviously, is cost, and that if the cost is high, only manufacturers who have serious counterfeit problems may enroll in the program. I think that's true. Like I said, 1 to 5 cents per unit, that may or may not take a brand's profitability at a unit level into negative territory. I'd be concerned if it did. Amazon may not be the channel for you, but Amazon it's not a cheap channel to sell through. You need to pay Amazon. If you're a seller, you need to pay Amazon a percentage fee. If you use FBA, you need to pay fulfillment fees. You still need to market those products. You need to be developing content, advertising on Amazon, advertising off Amazon. So yeah, I think that the manufacturers and brands who are really serious about the channel, it's something that they should be factoring into the price. So I do want to give periodic updates about transparency, because I do see it as a big step forward in Amazon's ability to police counterfeiting. Amazon's not doing this at the end of the day out of the goodness of their hearts to branded manufacturers. They are doing this in large part to prevent negative customer experiences and the negative press and reputation that Amazon has recently gained through just, by nature of it being such a popular marketplace, a lot of counterfeiters trying to take advantage of people shopping on the platform. So Amazon knows they had a big counterfeit problem in recent years. They're trying to get ahead of it. They need to get brands doing this themselves in order for it to work. And the final piece, this is a real wait and see thing for me, is that Amazon wants to get other retailers on board with this program, like the Targets of the world and, big brick and mortar retail chains, for them to be enrolled with transparency, because that would create a big network effect for Amazon. If all the other retailers are using transparency, that's Amazon's technology and they can control it. The benefit to everyone for that would be it's going to be very clear that counterfeit inventory can't get into the supply chain with major retailers or with Amazon. If everyone's involved with this program, it's going to be pretty much impossible, if the technology works as it's supposed to do, for counterfeit inventory to get in anywhere. And that's going to really also help with consumer adoption of transparency, and that everyone on the street knows what transparency is. They know when they buy something, they can use the app to check if it's legit. They know that if a product or a brand is enrolled in transparency, that it's going to be legitimate. Right now, there is not that kind of brand awareness of transparency, especially at the consumer level. So there is a lot more work that Amazon needs to do to promote transparency to shoppers. And if they can get other retailers involved with this as well, it's going to be a much easier battle. So, if we're talking about eBay, Target, Walmart, personally, it seems difficult to imagine any of those companies cooperating with Amazon on an Amazon-led program. Could happen. I'm just not convinced that any other retailer is going to, to cooperate with Amazon on a program like this. If they did, it would be game-changing though. So these are my thoughts on transparency so far, the information that I've received directly from Amazon's transparency team. Like I said, there's a lot of misinformation floating around the internet about this program, notably that it can be used as a channel management program, that you can only use it for your Amazon channel and not apply the codes for retailers or other channels. That is not true, and there are consequences for brands that attempt to use this as a channel management or vendor management program. So I'll leave it there. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback about transparency. If you've tried it and it was terrible, if you tried it and it was great, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment at ecommercebraintrust.com or send an email to info@bobsledmarketing.com. I'd love to get your thoughts. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week.